Stay away from me! I said stay back now! Please, I don't want any trouble!
Get yourself back here and keep your voice down.
Wait, what?
You deaf, son? I told you to keep quiet.
Look, I don't know what's going on. I'm here to conduct a dig for some stone tablets.
Shush!
Oh my god. What is that thing?
You haven't heard? Best to wait until Charles over there passes. Nothing good will come if we draw his attention.
It's got a name? That awful thing?
Yes, sir, we here on the island call him Charles. Half train, half gigantic spider. He's been the terror of Aranerum for years now. Me and some others on the island have been planning on how best to take him down. But there's still plenty to get in order before we even stand a chance.
It's like something out of a nightmare, but how? How does a steam train grow huge spider legs and a terrifying face like that?
Well, sit and hush a while, and I'll tell you the story. But you'll have to keep quiet, unless you want old Choo Choo Charles to hear us. You said you came to Aranerum looking for stone tablets, right? Well, sir, I know the ones you're looking for. Seen them myself, you know. But they won't tell you the whole story. No, sirree, things didn't start to get really bad until the Charles Mining Company came to this here peaceful island. Alright, before I start to get ahead of myself, I'll tell you about the tablets first. You're an archaeologist, right? Came here to grab some ancient piece of history to lock away in a museum? Well, finding those tablets is easy, but getting off the island without Charles catching you, well, that's a different story. The tablets, they tell an ancient legend from this here island. Years and years ago, before the dawn of man, there were monsters here on Aranerum. Vile, demonic things. Things that weren't human, that hunted humans. The kind of things that Charles could call them his great-great-great-grandparents. They were hungry critters, devoured anything and everything that moved. And they were fast, too. I mean, you'd move a lot fast with so many extra legs underneath you. So, as the legend goes, the island of Aranerum had people living on it back then, and they were getting tired of being hunted and eaten by these monsters, and so they needed warriors to fight back. Now sure, these fellas probably weren't anything special. Heck, I always like to think they were just ordinary folk of the land like me, and by working together, they were able to stand up to the creatures. They fought them off, grabbed whatever they could find to defend themselves, and said, "No more. We're tired of being hunted. We can't be afraid of the monsters forever." And you know the real crazy part, Mr. Archaeologist? It actually worked. The tablets don't say how they did it. Maybe the old warriors of Aranerum just fought and fought the monsters until there weren't any left. If it was me fighting alongside them back then, I would have tried to maybe use some explosives. Can't go wrong with things that go boom. But regardless, they banded together and pulled it off. They managed to seal the creature away underground. You see, Aranerum has plenty of caverns down below. That was where the monsters had been coming from, and that was where they had now been trapped. It must have seemed impossible to the island's warriors, but they must have been so pleased when they did it, and they'd be heartbroken if they learned all their hard work and sacrifice would one day be undone. The creatures were trapped underground, but they survived all right. Anyway, that was hundreds of years ago, maybe even thousands. So let's jump forwards in times a little more, to just a lifetime ago. My lifetime. I wasn't born here on Aranerum. No, I grew up far way back on the mainland. I never would have been able to guess that this place would become like a second home to me, despite this island also being home to a monster. All right. I won't bore you with my life story. Goodness, I know that's not the sort of history you're interested in anyway. All I'll say is this. I've lived a long life, seen things that most ordinary folk would never truly believe, but I'd never seen evil before. True evil, I mean. That is, until I started working for the Charles Mining Company. You see, I was out of a job, and back then work was pretty scarce. What's more, I had a family, a wife and a newborn son, Paul. So when I heard that Warren Charles III was hiring, I signed on up. Honest work for honest pay, they told me. I shouldn't have listened. Well, Eugene, I've got to say you certainly seem physically suited for the job. Your background was railway work, is that correct? Well, yes, sir, I know that's mighty different to mining, but after all that lifting and shoveling coal into those engines, I'd say lifting a pickaxe shouldn't be too hard. Indeed. But to be honest with you, Eugene, it's not your ability that concerns me. No, I don't doubt you'll have no trouble with a pick. No, what I'm more interested in is your discretion. Pardon me, Mr. Charles? I need to know if you can be trusted, if you can keep secrets. Warren Charles III inherited his family's mining company from his father and grandfather before him. I should have turned away the second he mentioned keeping secrets. but I needed the work to support my family. So of course I told him, "Well, absolutely, sir." What a fool. You see, Mr. Charles needed workers who could stay quiet. If any one of us blabbed to the press, it would ruin his reputation and sink his family's entire company into the ground. Warren Charles didn't want anyone from the mainland prying too much into what he was doing, and all of us working for him were too much in need of money to spill his secrets. Keeping my head down and staying quiet must have worked, because Mr. Charles took a real shine to me. I hadn't been working for him long before he announced he'd be sending me and a handful of his other workers off onto a new mining operation, and that he wanted me to be the team supervisor. This is your first big rodeo, Eugene, and I know you'll be up to it. Just remember my #1 policy: loose lips sink ships. And speaking of ships, I've procured a boat for you and the rest of the men. Where exactly is it we're heading to, sir? It's a little island called Aranirum. None of us asked Mr. Charles what we were going to be mining for on Aranirum. We all knew better than to ask him questions. And even if we did ask, no doubt he would have kept us in the dark anyway. Could have even docked our wages and fired us. Left us out of a job for daring to even ask. So when he declared that he was going to be joining us on the boat to the island, not one of the workers in my team said a word. Things began smoothly during the first week. Mr. Charles had acquired some maps of the island and used that to direct us towards the locations we'd been mining. Of course, although we'd all wondered the same thing, nobody inquired as to where these mysterious maps had come from or what we were looking for. We set up much quicker than usual, even built up a rudimentary railway with trains from the Charles Mining Company to haul raw materials out of the mines and around the island. Mr. Charles wasn't his usual cold, callous self. He was acting in a way I'd never seen before. He was eager, excited even, like he couldn't wait for us to get digging, even if it meant putting his own workers' safety at risk. By the time we reached Sunday, my men and I were exhausted. We'd hardly stopped working, and it was obvious to all of us that we needed more hands, a larger team. But to keep costs down, Mr. Charles was opting to instead work us all to death. He must have sensed that our group morale was quickly starting to drop, and so he made his most surprising move yet. He brought all our families to Aranirum. I thought there was no way that could have been cheaper than hiring more workers, but we were all so surprised and pleased to see them that it distracted us. Nobody stopped to question it, but Mr. Charles had our wives, sons, daughters, brothers, sisters, grandkids, all right there. And if we refused to work, he could have easily had them killed. Soon after, Warren Charles banned all communication with the mainland. He isolated us, yes. We had our families close by, but we had no contact with the rest of the world off Aranirum. Then he started demanding we work for free, and to protect our families, we had no choice other than to agree. That was when we found the ruins. During the mining, we uncovered a huge ancient temple, or what was left of it anyway. There was a vein of pure gold running through the earth too, and that's what we all assumed we were the first there for. After all, we weren't archaeologists like you, sir. We dug for raw materials, not old temples, but Mr. Charles, he was more interested in the ruins than the gold. But we were about to make the most shocking discovery of all. We dug through into a large cavern. Some of my men called me over to take a look at what they had found. I couldn't believe my eyes. They were unlike anything I'd ever seen. From the way they glowed even deep underground, I thought they were perhaps precious gems, and they were definitely as tough as diamonds. Nobody could crack them. Gemstones. That would have been a simpler explanation of why Mr. Charles was so eager for us to work. But the closer I looked, I realized what they were. Eggs. Of course, I rushed to tell Mr. Charles. It's about time. Sir, you mean that this is what we've been looking for all this time? You knew we'd find these things? You know I don't like questions, Eugene. Now have the men gather up as many of the eggs as they can. You'll load them. I should have told him no, then rounded up all my men and their families and left the island there and then. If I did, maybe more of them would still be alive. When we started extracting the eggs, the tunnels underground began to shake. So we worked faster, trying to pry the luminescent eggs out in fear that there would be a cave-in. But it seemed like the quicker we hacked and chipped away at the stone, the more the ground rumbled. We could only get our hands on a few of the eggs, about 3 in total, and load them up onto the train out of the mine. Me and a few others barely managed to get out of there alive, but some of my men weren't so lucky. The tunnel caved in just after Mr. Charles had sent them back in to retrieve more of the eggs. The ones I had made it out with weren't enough for him. And as if that wasn't all bad enough, it seemed that we had woken something up. The thing that had caused the cave-in was a monster, like the ones from the legends of Aranerum. It was a huge spider, bigger than a man, and it had woken up hungry.
That's the same one? The spider from the cave-in?
Yes, sir, he made his way out, and he's been terrorizing everyone left on the island since. Climbed into one of the mining company's trains, and it became a kind of protective shell for him. That's why we call him Charles.
And the other Charles, Warren Charles III, I mean?
Oh, he's still around. Some of the leftover workers stayed loyal to him. They've been helping him guard the eggs until he can uncover more.
The eggs? What are they for?
Well, some smarty archaeologists you sure are. There's more than one monster here on Aranerum. The eggs are filled with more spiders, just like Charles. There's no telling what a man like Warren Charles III could do if he ever learned to train those beasts.
And you have a plan to stop Charles? To stop both of them?
I sure do. The plan is run!